Hello Enlightened Ones, thank you for joining your Reverend today. In today's video, we're going to be going over the Outlast Trials. This is a game that I feel like probably could have competed with Dead by Daylight if it just had the online potential of a player versus player type environment. This game has so much potential. It's funny because I just got back into playing it a little bit. It's kind of an on and off sort of thing. The game kind of sits at about an average of about 1,700 players during the weekdays and about 2,000 players on the weekends. And I remember when this game first came out, it had a lot of potential, but due to a numbering different things that have happened with the game over the years and what it still continues to struggle with is why it never really got on par with Dead by Daylight. Now, you had a bunch of different asymmetrical horror games that have come out over the years. To my understanding, Dead by Daylight was kind of one of those major ones that had came out. Followed suit was Friday the 13th. Then you had these aren't in any particular order by any means, but then you have Evil Dead that also came out, which I think was a pretty good. It had the potential. The problem is it had a lot of balancing issues, and it kind of sucks because I really enjoyed Evil Dead when that came out. I had it on Epic because I wasn't about to wait for it to come to Steam. That was like the one Epic game I can say that I actually did not wait for. So all the Steam guys are probably going to grill the hell out of your Reverend today, but I digress. Then you got Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Never even picked that one up because obviously I noticed a trend where what I had noticed is with all these horror type asymmetrical games, at least the ones that are actually licensed, like Texas Chainsaw, Evil Dead, I've noticed those type of IPs don't last very long. And it's because they don't have the same amount of creative freedom like Dead by Daylight has or Outlast Trials. That's what makes Outlast Trials a great candidate to go up against Dead by Daylight because honestly, Dead by Daylight, it's just one of those games that just has this weird competitive loop that everybody loves playing. Outlast Trials tries to do that. The only problem is there's no player versus player environment, and it's its own IP though. So they could do whatever the hell they want with Outlast Trials, but their issue is it's not a player versus player paid service, right? Live service, as the AAA corporate RTARDs like to call it, right? Unfortunately, I think if Outlast Trials were to be more of a player versus player type of environment, I think it had the potential to actually go up against Dead by Daylight, and I honestly 100% agree with that, 100%. But this isn't a Outlast Trials versus Dead by Daylight video, no. I'm just kind of giving my little 2 cents there. That's probably a topic for another video to kind of compare and contrast. But what I'm just trying to get at here is that honestly, this is its own IP. They can do whatever the hell they want with it, which allows them the most amount of creative freedom possible, just like Dead by Daylight. See, when you start creating these IPs or these licensed games anyway, like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Evil Dead, there's only so much creative freedom they can do with those games. I mean, yeah, you can kind of put your own spin on it, but at the end of the day, there's some figurehead at the very top that owns that license that gives them the green light to basically say, yes, you can use that, no, you can't use that, whereas these are their own IPs and they own them, they can do whatever the hell they want with them. So that's kind of why I think that this was the perfect candidate in any way. But yes, Outlast Trials is one of those games that deals with MK Ultra, which is like brainwashing, mind control, government mind control, that sort of deal. So the trials are based off of basically breaking down the human being to basically become this super soldier, essentially. So you had the Cold War going on right now, and so the whole idea with trials was to create these super soldiers that were basically resilient to anything, fear, pain, suffering, that sort of deal, right? So that's why the trials existed, to beat all that human nature out of them, essentially, to become the ultimate super soldier, if you will. Outlast Trials is a very creative game. Every trial looks like a Halloween maze. You ever been to Halloween Horror Nights or like Not Scary Farm or Six Flags Fright Fest or something like that? That is the perfect definition of Outlast Trials. It's literally like walking through a Halloween maze and you have all the X-Pops as like your scare actors, essentially. Every trial has its own unique feel to it. It's like in a giant warehouse with a bunch of wooden fabrications all over the place with a bunch of detailed like billboards of like mannequins and all kinds of creative weird shit all over the place. And honestly, the thing with Outlast Trials too is there is a bunch of just like in your face nudity, and that's how they get that little grotesque factor. I mean, Outlast has always been like that, which is why it's its own version of horror. You got like the grotesque horror, and then you got like, you know, Dead by Daylight. It's more of a 80s horror slasher version, whereas this is more of the grotesque, in your face, balls in your face, dick in your face, pussy in your face type of game. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think there's just two different versions of horror. You either like that kind of stuff or you don't. And you know what? Since I am a man of the Lord, your Reverend's favorite trial in Outlast Trials is probably going to be Cleanse the Orphans. I love giving my children the bread of Jesus. It's funny because even the cam quality, my cam is like so crappy that it gives this grainy, because my lighting isn't that good, it gives this grainy effect that almost looks like night vision too. And maybe I'll put a green filter over the top of it for a split second. I think one of the biggest downfalls to Outlast Trials is actually, aside from it's not a player versus player kind of environment, which it ought to be, or they ought to think about doing, I think one of its biggest downfalls is its AI. Honestly, the AI in this game is pretty rough. Let me tell you, I went through all the psychosurgery trials all by myself with no help at all, and let me tell you, it doesn't feel hard, it just feels annoying to play. And maybe that's the whole premise of therapy, is it's supposed to, it's almost like a psychological thing on the actual player that's even playing these trials, is it's meant to be extremely more frustrating and annoying than it is hard. And so that's why I find it kind of funny when Red Barrels calls these trials or psychosurgery hard. What I'm having an issue with, and you know what, you're gonna have some of these Outlast trial diehards or whatever, even though there's really no skill behind a game that's already dying. You got a lot of these guys that might even say it sounds like a skill issue, bro, but it really isn't. I'm finding that a lot of the AI likes to do these like 180 turns, abrupt turns, and look, I understand the AI is meant to be kind of jittery and jerky because the X-Pops are psychologically not well, but I'm having an issue where they just jerk, where you can't judge their locomotion too well in terms of their animations, and so they do some weird shit where they'll 180 you, and you won't even make a noise, you won't even be doing nothing, they'll just 180 you and just start chasing after you, and you had no idea that they were even onto you. So it's really weird and bizarre how the AI works in this game, so it's very unpredictable and very hard to tell as a player when the X-Pop is actually going to be moving around. You guys wanted some acting? This is how their locomotion be sometimes. I ain't even fucking around. Yeah, you'll just be crouching, you know, kind of something like this, you know, just doing your little, you know, they do that weird little crouch walk thing. And then you'll be perfectly still, right? And then this is how the enemy reacts. Notice how jerky that animation was. There was no smoothness in it. It was a cut, direct cut, bro. It literally went like this, and then the way a human body works. Alright, Red Barrels, take some lessons here. And you know what? Behavior's got some lessons to learn from this shit too. Because both these games, these asymmetrical games, don't have a very fluid locomotion. And look, I'm no game developer, okay? So don't get mad at me. I'm just saying, you do your job and you make them look fluid, okay? I don't know how this shit works. I do know a little bit of animation in terms of how keyframing and all that type of shit works. I did dip my toes a little bit into the game development aspect when I was working on Dead by Daylight's leaks and shit. But look, you do this, right? A nice turn, a nice fluid turn, right? No jerk to that, right? It's just it's a very, you can still make it quick, but you have to kind of make the animation believable enough for the player to go, shit, he's turning around, I need to fucking move my ass. There's no jerkiness in the animation. It literally goes from like this, and then maybe a little bit of something like that, or maybe a little bit of... See how fluid that was? See, you got to see the animation where I turn and go in that direction, right? There's no turning though. It's just a jerk, like it's literally something like that. It's literally there's no keyframing in the smoothness in the animation of going and walking in that direction, and that's a problem that I feel they need to improve on. What I find the enemy doing the most is patrolling the living shit out of objectives, especially on psychosurgery. And yes, one would argue, well, it's psychosurgery. It's meant to do that. It's the hardest difficulties. I find it more annoying rather than actually hard. On Pleasure the Prosecutor, I noticed this the most, where if you go to try to get one of the mannequins, they just patrol the living shit out of the entire vicinity. On psychosurgery, they're on a predetermined path based off of where the player is located in that specific room. I've caught this when I was literally beating my head to death trying to get an A on this, is that I noticed that the AI was following me no matter where I was in the room. They knew where like a rough area of where I was hiding in the map, and they wanted to see if I would fuck up. So the AI, they're designed to just go off of where the player is and just constantly keep following you. There's a spot. It's the first mannequin that you get from for the theater. There's an upstairs, and it loops back and goes right back downstairs, and it goes back into the room. It's basically like a square, but it goes upwards. That is a perfect example of the AI will follow you no matter where you are in the map, like literally, or at least that section. You'll literally be crouch walking up the stairs, and then it just keeps following you and following you and following you and following you until you have to turn on the next light switch, essentially. I don't find that, if that's Red Barrel's version of hard, I don't really know what to tell you. I don't find that hard. I just find it annoying. One would argue, well, all you would have to do is just camp in a corner, right? And then the AI would not have any chance of getting you at all. I would say you're 100% correct on that. I don't know how you could fix this issue, but it's definitely something that I don't consider hard. It's just more of an annoyance than it is hard to me. And I don't know. I find that kind of one aspect of the AI that's just kind of to me, that I feel like it needs a rework in terms of how the AI behaves, in terms of where you are in the room, and its predetermined path to be proxying the areas, if you will. And it's funny because the X-Pops are timed, so sometimes you can even take advantage of the AI, and I feel like that's what a lot of players have like come to do now with this game, and that's why it becomes kind of trivial, especially when you have 4 players. It's different when you play alone on psychosurgery. When you're playing alone, like it's a much tougher time. But if you play with 4 other people, most people know how to take advantage of the AI while the other people do the objective. So literally, like, this game becomes more and more easier and more trivial the more you play it. And I feel like that's one problem with the game, is they take advantage of how the AI basically reacts to you and use that to a player's full advantage. Like, I saw one guy literally try to get hit. He jumps backwards from the X-Pop, so that way he'll play the animation just so he can get around him. I think that's awesome. That's kind of a way to avoid being hit and to buy yourself some time because they're locked in that animation, right? But it becomes just too easy sometimes when you're just literally taking advantage of the way that the AI reacts, right? So, I don't know. Overall, the AI in this game needs a rework of some way, shape, or form, to where it always kind of mixes things up. Players have realized that this game is a little too easy and it gets too repetitive, and I think that's why it fell on its face so damn hard. Then there's the mechanics. I feel like the mechanics are just kind of rough sometimes, and it's because of the way that Outlast is as a game. It was always like this since the first game, right? The way you open and close doors, I don't know how many times I've actually fucked myself trying to quickly close a door behind me, only to have my player close it in front of me instead, and then I get hit. That is just an A+ right there. You literally like have to put your camera and your mouse in the most specific spot possible. Otherwise, you're gonna fuck yourself. Mechanics are kind of a issue in this game, just a little bit. Not sure how you can fix this problem either, because this is just kind of how the game plays. But man, the amount of times I fucked myself sometimes just doing psychosurgery is not fun. Even though they got new trials that come out and they're pretty looking, they have all this creative aesthetic to them, at the end of the day, it's still the same song and dance. The game needs something, some different type of gameplay, other than just completing trials all day. It's got to be, I mean, yes, the name is Trials, but implement some kind of different, unique gameplay aspect of it, so that way it doesn't feel like you're still doing the same thing over and over and over again. Again, I guess that's the argument of the game, is you're meant to do the same things over and over again because it's therapy, right? But from a person playing it, though, right? Let's think a little bit more of the person trying to play it, right? Maybe I'm not understanding the big picture here, but if you want to hold a viewer's attention, it needs to be something that's fun, addictive, some kind of loop, but it needs to be addictive. I'm just gonna say it. Dead by Daylight has a very addictive loop, but there's always something changing about it, and I'll tell you what it is, and I've already talked about it. It's the player versus player aspect, though. You never know the intentions of another player, which is why Dead by Daylight has become successful, because it's that player versus player. I'm gonna one up this other player. I'm gonna show him I'm a better player type of thing. It's this ego thing that we have when we play games like that we get so addicted to that we want to do better than the opposite player. And that's kind of why I think Outlast Trials, if it were to have been more successful and it did more of a player versus player approach and still leave the co-op aspect still in this game, so for those players that just want a single player co-op experience, they can still experience that. But for some of us that want to actually have that player versus player type of deal, this is how I would personally do it. Gooseberry, Coil, you can have players play as the main X-Pops, and just have the lower tier X-Pops as just floating NPCs to kind of help you out around the map. I don't know in terms of the gameplay how it would work, or perk system, or a cooldown system and all that, because obviously people would just stun lock the shit out of you with stuns and healing and all that, and it would become a mess in terms of trolling and everything. I can already see the toxicity with this game comparatively to Dead by Daylight and what it will breed if you were to keep all these stun abilities and shit like that to basically overstun the crap out of you as a X-Pop. So I really don't know how you could really make this a player versus player type of game. What I can say is it definitely needs it. And of course, to keep it going, it does need to be a live service type of environment. So, you know, paid cosmetics, that whole spiel, you know, it's a controversial type of subject. But if you want a game to constantly keep making content to support the developers, and you know what, if they do a good job and there's no weird controversies like Dead by Daylight had, which is why I left it, I'm all for it. I'll support it. I'll buy cosmetics. I have no issue with that. I want to see something compete with Dead by Daylight so bad, and I think Trials would have been definitely that game that should have been. Anyways, everybody, I think that's going to do it for this video. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns for your Reverend here today, go ahead and shoot them in the comment section below. I do look at comments, and I do like to see what you guys think about this type of subject as well as this topic. Like, share, and subscribe would help me get thrown into the algorithm. You guys have a fantastic day. Until next time on the next episode of Dragon Ball Pay. A woman has to suffer many great things in life. I know, but please endure for my sake. At least for the sake of our children. I promise, darling, it'll be just a quick moment, just a cut of the flesh here and here. Cut away and take away everything vulgar over here. And soon we will have the perfect place to welcome my seed, to grow our family.